Battlefield 6 is just on the horizon, so I've been thinking about it a lot. I really enjoyed playing the beta, and since then, I've either been replaying Battlefield 3 or collecting tiers in 2042's current lead-up pass. But what I've really been thinking about a lot is the premise of Battlefield 6, and a theory I've been brewing up for a few weeks now. Since the game is under a month from launch, we'll see soon enough if I was onto anything. Set in 2027, Battlefield 6 sees NATO beginning to crumble alongside growing unrest in the world. Many of NATO's member states leave, having lost the sense of security the alliance once provided. Now needing to shore up forces on their own, a majority of these countries begin outsourcing military operations to PMCs, or private military companies, one of the largest of these being a group called Pax Armada. As the global paradigm shifts, Pax Armada engages remaining NATO forces abroad, and eventually brings the fight to New York City. Before we continue, let's go over some background. Apart from spin-offs and possibly earlier entries, the Battlefield games take place in a single timeline. So, past events from Battlefield 3 and 4, as well as future events from 2042 and eventually 2142, fit in an overarching narrative. For the most pertinent entry right now, we'll be taking a look at Battlefield 3. In Battlefield 3, set in 2014, U.S. Marine Staff Sergeant Henry Blackburn discovers an impending nuclear attack on the West by the People's Liberation and Resistance. Following the trail, he is eventually co-opted by former Spetsnaz Vimpel operator Dima Mayakovsky to thwart said attack, which will take the form of 2 detonations in Paris and New York City. While Blackburn was able to stop the nuke in NYC, Dima could not stop the one in Paris. Detonating in the Euronext Bourse, the Paris bombing resulted in an estimated 80,000 casualties. Blame was laid upon Russia, whose nukes were stolen for the attack. This led to the War of 2014, the setting of the game's multiplayer. Now, broadly speaking, these games are mostly self-contained, with events and characters barely glossed over in following entries. However, when Battlefield 2042 released, this all changed. We found out the fates of quite a few characters. Mainly, this encompassed those from Battlefield 4, like Irish, Pac, Hannah, even Major Greenland. But, would you look at that? We've also got an entry for Henry Blackburn. Let's see what he's been up to. After the events of Battlefield 3, Blackburn was dishonorably discharged, having killed his CEO during his hunt for the nukes. Finding himself alone in a changing world, he chose to change with it. One outcome is the eventual founding of the Archangel Corporation, an entity featured prominently throughout Battlefield 2042. But what I'm really interested in right now is this sentence here. By the 2020s, he secretly headed one of the most powerful PMCs in the world. Curious. Now, I'm sure by now you can already see where I'm headed with this. I think that Blackburn might be the secret leader of Pax Armada. Hell, this very codex entry outright states that the world became increasingly dependent upon PMCs during that time frame. This is a point further emphasized in DICE's World of Battlefield 6 video, and exemplified with Pax Armada's global prominence across trailers. Let me be clear, I don't think that Black will physically show up in Battlefield 6, but I do think they might be meaning for us to infer that his hand is on the wheel. To that end, let's explore more elements of the world of 2027. In the second teaser for Battlefield 6, we see that France is one of the major nations to leave NATO. While the country they mentioned could very well have been random chance, I don't think that's the case. As mentioned before, Paris was successfully nuked in 2014. We know this definitively from Dima's lingering radiation sickness in Battlefield 4, as well as the loss of Sundance's parents as mentioned in a 2042 Codex entry. Once open conflict erupted between the United States and Russia, some of the battles may have occurred in Paris proper. Taking that into consideration, it's extremely likely, even if not outright stated, that NATO is involved, especially since one of its member states literally becomes a battlefield. I think it's entirely possible that France grew disillusioned with NATO and the United States due to the intelligence failure that led to the Paris bombing. After all, it took Solomon's corpse literally laying in Times Square with a nuke for the CIA to finally get the memo that their asset had turned. France itself becoming a battleground in the ensuing war certainly would have amplified such discouragement. With the United States still openly fighting Russia 6 years later, it's unknown whether the War of 2014 ever really ended. France could have been involved that whole time. Later, in 2020, the US opened an additional theater of war against China. France, witnessing NATO's de facto leader enter yet another disastrous conflict, might only grow more disdainful of any potential obligation to join in. This sentiment would continue to grow until France, among other NATO members, finally decide to leave the military alliance behind, viewing it as nothing more than an archaic platform for eternal bloodshed. France is likely one of the many who employ Pax Armata, with the teaser edited to imply as much.
Nations are leaving NATO to join a new coalition with
destabilize world security.
Pax Armata.
With this in mind, Pax Armata's attack on the very city that was spared Paris's fate earns itself a spiteful edge. For an additional layer of irony, it just might be that such an attack is ultimately perpetrated by the very man who safeguarded New York from said fate. Quick side note, Pax Armata in Latin would be literally translated as peace armed, or, more flowingly, armed peace. Non-literally, I can see it interpreted as equipped for peace, or perhaps peace through arms. Archangel Corporation, the company that Blackburn eventually founds, or perhaps reforms Pax into, has the following motto: Progressio in pace, Ascensio in bello. In English, this formally translates to in peace, evolution; in war, ascension. I don't know about you, but the emphasis on the dichotomy of peace and war in both strikes me as a little forward. And since we're on the topic of Archangel, let's look a little deeper into their possible history. In Battlefield 4's Final Stand DLC, set in the waning days of the War of 2020, there are name drops of a group called Archangel. It is worth noting that Final Stand is of dubious canonicity, but as far as I'm concerned, Battlefield as a series has enough trouble as it is remaining consistent. What's one more thing? Anyways, Archangel appears to be rather well funded, supplying the latent Pan-Asian Coalition, or perhaps the Three Petals Coalition, with very advanced weapons and equipment. Now, these new details can muddy up the timeline quite a bit, so let me share my thoughts on this. First off, let's address the tech and faction problem. It's entirely possible, knowing the future coalition's habit of infiltrating and usurping world governments, that the bases explored in Final Stand belong to a TPC-affiliated splinter group of the extant Russian government. As for China, perhaps Admiral Chang was a coalition plant, his faction affiliated with the secretive movement. With China's apparent defeat during the War of 2020 and the final battles of the Russian theater fought in remote sectors of the taiga and Siberia, it's extremely likely that the developmentally advanced materiel were lost to time. What few blueprints and prototypes remained might simply have gone back into Archangel's vaults to be uncased during a more fortuitous opportunity. Regarding another inconsistency, let's talk about Archangel's mere existence in 2020. So, off the top, the spelling. What the hell? Sometimes spellings change. I guess, sure. Technically, who even knows if these companies are related? It's not like Archangel as a term is particularly unique. From what I can discern, there is nothing that officially and explicitly states that they're related. But, for the sake of discussion, let's just pretend they are related for a second. Now, you might be asking, why say Archangel exists when you're already theorizing that Pax Armata belongs to Blackburn? Why even add this tenuous layer to your theory? Well, it could be that Blackburn just has a very diversified portfolio as far as his investments go. Perhaps this Archangel belongs under the umbrella of what will eventually be reformed or revealed to be the Archangel Corporation as we know it in 2042. This could work because there exists some 2042 Codex entries showing Blackburn's fiduciary responsibility to the Three Petals Coalition.
I've convened the board meeting today to discuss the ongoing developments with the TPC and our Shearwater program.
It's not inconceivable either that this relationship could stem back almost 30 years to the late 2010s and early 2020s. If my theory about his involvement with Pax Armada is correct, these extra details provide additional motive for striking at the United States. It could be a situation not unlike that of Oz in 2042, that of a desire to establish a new world under his vision, requiring destruction of the old one. To that end, Blackburn would be creating and maintaining alliances to further deepen the grave of American influence. Hell, even Battlefield 3's novelization, subtitled The Russian, has this as an eventual focal point. It is revealed that some Russian apparatchiks saw the writing on the wall for America's global supremacy, figuring that the PLR's planned nuclear strikes would expedite this outcome. As a result, the elements planning the reacquisition of the nukes undermined all attempts to do so. Intelligence went ungathered, operational details were leaked, and equipment was scantily provided. And with the state of the world come 2027, their push seems to have worked well enough. Remember, this book was from 2011, way before any of these other dangling threads. Just something more to think about. Well, anyway, thank you for sitting through my rambling. I'd be more than happy to clarify anything in the comments. If anyone is interested, I've also been planning on making a video about the novelization, so keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, I hope to see you guys in Battlefield 6. You all have a good one.
Fucking face tonight!